the Virtual CISO Moment. There I am. Forgot to click a button there. It's early on the morning of December 16th, 2025, and I got something a little bit different today. I'm going to talk about predictions. Everybody else does predictions, so I figured I'd go ahead and do it myself too. These aren't going to be really your standard predictions for the security arena. These are things that over the past year, particularly over the past, last few months, I guess, really have been percolating in my mind more and more. I'm not going to talk about frameworks or tools or breaches, at least specific ones. I want to talk about 5 predictions I'm going to have, not from a hype perspective, but from patterns that I've been seeing a lot across SMBs, but really across the industry as well too. Startups, seeing it with some audits, some of the consulting agreements that we've been working on, and also just conversations that I've had with you all. For example, what we've done on the Virtual CISO Moment over the past year, and what we talk about on LinkedIn, what we talked about in person. These aren't futuristic predictions. They're second-order consequences of things that are already happening today. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first one you're probably going to be a little familiar with. Prediction number 1, I like to frame it as the SOC 2 will lose its easy button. Everybody knows that the SOC 2 is never meant to be a seal of security. It's a attestation of things that are in place right now, basically attesting to what the company is saying that they're actually doing with regards to information security. It's not a framework, it's not a certification, and it's never been meant to be this like end-all, do-all seal, if you will, of information security. But that's often how it's treated. I think everybody, for the most part, will agree that SOC 2's become almost like a check-the-box exercise. We see a lot of audit firms, for example, they rely heavily on automation. We see this too with consulting firms where they're focused on helping organizations pass, not improve their security programs. You see, with audit firms, you see minimal auditor engagement. Little or zero on-site validation. You don't have the interaction with the auditor explaining or at least trying to understand what the system description is about. It's been a while since I've been involved in a SOC 2 audit where they've really dug into that. I can spool back like 5 or 6 years ago, flying up to Iowa, this is early in my vCISO days, to actually meet with the auditor there at a client site. And we spent the day, maybe it was 2 days, really digging through stuff. It was collaborative. Fast forward to last year, I was on a SOC 2, barely had meetings with folks. It was just all exchange on a platform. Now, excuse the pun, but this has resulted in a false sense of security. You remember back in the day when people had firewalls? I think there was a commercial. I think it was Barracuda, actually. I don't mind calling them out now. It's been a while, but this exchange between a couple of people in an office, and it's obviously very poor actors, but one person's like really worried about the security, and the other person's like, no, we're all good. IT just told me that we have now a firewall and everything is fine. We're all secure. Well, the SOC 2 has become something like that as well too. We have our SOC 2, so we must be secure. That's how it's presented to the C-suite, to the board of directors, and that is dangerous. Now, the AICPA has recognized that declining audit quality and has already begun tightening guidance. So they've got now clearer expectations around control effectiveness and stronger emphasis on professional skepticism and more scrutiny of audit firms that are issuing these reports. This is so much needed. If we can get back to a point where the SOC 2 actually had some meaning beyond what it is now, I'm not going to discount it 100%. In some ways, for some organizations, it is a good beginning step to building security programs. So there is still value there. It's just the way it's treated. And if we can flip that back to where folks aren't building security programs to meet the SOC 2 attestation requirements, rather they're building security programs to secure information and then validating, at least with a point in time with their controls of what they're doing, through a meaningful SOC 2 exercise, then it'll regain its value. So by 2026, or in 2026, I should say, auditors will be more engaged and more technically competent. Really hope to see this. Have you ever had a discussion with an auditor and you have, it almost seems like you're explaining like basic InfoSec 101, compensating controls? Evidence quality will matter more than evidence volume. It's number 2. And that's the way it should be. Instead of being able to produce these reams and reams of data, just show from a risk perspective why this control takes care of that requirement. They're also going to become harder to pass without exceptions. And that's good, because I think that they're going to be holding feet to the fire, more accountability. Now, for you CISOs and vCISOs, this is obvious. I said it before. I'm going to say it again. The SOC 2 should always be a byproduct of the security program, not the goal. So my hope is that you all manage towards that point. And to those virtual CISOs that are out there promoting the SOC 2 as the goal first, please reconsider what you're doing. All right, prediction number 2, and this is a little bit more near and dear to me, based on a project that or a couple of projects I've been working on for the last couple of months. Vibe coding will create a new class of security incidents. So I don't know how familiar you are with is. I love analogies, always have loved analogies. So the analogy I use is WordPress, and you're probably thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be a bad analogy, but bear with me for a second. GoDaddy may be a good one as well too. When HTML first came out, when we as old folks would build websites, we would do just that. We would actually build it using code, HTML code, line by line, knew what each thing represented. Of course, websites were a lot simpler back then as well too. It became a little bit harder to do, and then it became really impractical, impossible to do. I don't think anybody codes a website by hand unless it's just a very simple type page. And so we've had over the years products that have come out to go in between this abstraction layer between the actual code and what it is that the person's trying to do. So GoDaddy and WordPress are 2 examples. GoDaddy is an easier one. GoDaddy makes it very easy. They've sold this for years and years and years. Makes it very easy for a business to get online by making website creation very, very simple. You can take like pre-formatted templates. You can take blocks and this and that and put it together. WordPress accelerates that and gives you a lot of options on what you can do with regards to putting in different modules or different other features, ways for tracking. It basically makes building a website easier so that you don't have to learn every single little bit of code. And so folks like me and most SMBs out there can put up a website in a decent website, a functional one, in relatively short period of time. So vibe coding is kind of like that. Instead of learning how to be a coder to be able to build an application, a web-based application, vibe coding, the platforms, they allow you to do that. And I believe the reason why they call it vibe coding is because it gives you a lot of freedom. You can try something, an idea, and very easily, without getting lost into the actual coding stuff, you can very easily see what the result's going to be. And for me, that's so critically important because I'm so much a visual person. It's like I know what my website wants me to look like, what wants it to look like. I don't think the website wants me to look like anything. But maybe with AI, maybe AI would prefer that I look a little bit different. I don't know. That's a whole nother thing. But it's so easy for me to get from what's up here to on the screen and trying it. And what's important about that is because then I see it and that triggers more ideas. So you see this really functional flywheel of imagination, application, business use, imagination, and continuing on and on. So vibe coding is going to be around for a while with these platforms. But there's a growing risk that most organizations are prepared for. Now, I've seen some things that have happened. A couple of specific examples are Well, with one, I was using a shim product, for lack of a better word, an intermediate product that takes um, information from one source and feeds it into the vibe coding platform. And this particular application using AI said, hey, tell me what it is that you're trying to do, and I'll build you the workflow. And I did, and it did, and it was wonderful. It was great. Wasn't working 100%, but a lot of times with the AI assisted coding, there are two issues. One is it may not work properly, but two is it may not be proper, period, which means in any case, you need to at least review it and see what it's doing. And that doesn't mean that you need to understand line by line code of any language. It just means you need to understand the logic behind it. And so I'm looking at this, and it was working, but it was dropping a file that I was trying to transfer that wasn't overly sensitive, but I considered it confidential. It dropped it in an S3 bucket, and the S3 bucket was not secured. Of course, there was this long URL, which would be very difficult to guess, but that's not the point. That's not security. Security by obscurity is a speed bump. It's not true security. And immediately I was like, this is not good. And I mentioned it to the platform AI, and the platform AI said, well, yeah, we can secure that for you if you want. And that's the problem. By default, there wasn't that sort of security put in. I wasn't even asked about it. Now, for me as a security person, I'm going to look for these sorts of things. But if you got 98% of the folks out there, give or take, I'm just guessing, they're not going to look. They're just going to be like, well, it works, so we don't need to look any deeper. So that's one example. I've seen it happen a couple of times where there was a time when I was building something to upload documents, and I didn't understand at the time the protections that were available for me with regards to keeping the information private. And then I figured it out as I was learning the platform. But there's no warnings beforehand. Hey, you're going to be doing this. Do you want to check the privacy of your information first? Again, my point is that even for me, I started to let that slip, even for me as a security person. So you're going to see now as more applications are built by, executives, product managers, business owners, and just non-techie staff, this is going to really increase the attack surface. Unfortunately, I think in 2026, we're going to see more breaches that are directly attributable to these sorts of things. Misconfigured low-code tools, like I was talking about, that have defaults that aren't secure. See, we should have learned from, and if you want to correct me on this, my memory might be failing, but I seem to remember that in the beginning, when AWS offered S3 buckets, that they were public by default, and they flipped that because of all the issues that were going on. It's kind of like a firewall. I love using firewall examples as an analogy, as you can tell. A firewall has a default to deny, or at least it should. I'm sure that there are some of you who have run across, like me, implementations where they have firewall rules and there's no default to deny at the end. It's like, well, this is really no good here. So, but everything should be built with a security mindset, but we can't rely upon that. And that's the problem. I think we've created a culture where people think that if it works, it must be secure, and that's not the case. So vibe coding is fine. I'm continuing to use it. Actually working on building a product right now. And I've learned an awful lot with it, but it's if the vibe coding is ungoverned and unrestrained. That's the issue, and without awareness. All right, prediction number 3. Something near and dear to my heart. The vCISO market will self-correct. So the virtual CISO has been around for a long time. I've talked about it on this podcast many times. Just to summarize, many of my guests, we've had this conversation, but early on, spool back, well, when I started the virtual CISO stuff almost 9 years ago, just about all the virtual CISOs out there were folks like me, CISOs, full-time, who have decided to take their talents and their time and make a go of helping small and mid-sized businesses businesses in a part-time capacity, consultative capacity. Great model. My tagline was along the lines of SMBs need the experience of a full-time CISO, but don't necessarily need to spend the money to have someone full-time. And that worked great. Look at the virtual CISO market today. You ask someone, what is a virtual CISO? And nobody can define it anymore. It's become so broad, and it's really, really muddied the understanding among small and mid-sized businesses. And what has pushed this is basically money. It's become more lucrative. So you see practitioners that are in the market right now who've never held the CISO title or the Senior Information Security Executive title. And usually those types of people, they're much more technically focused and very, very low as far as risk management and business acumen skills. I have talked about this an awful lot on the podcast. A lot of times they have is to drive more customer engagement. And there's problems with that because outside of like kind of being unethical to begin with, there's this separation of, and I guess that they dovetail together. But what I mean by that is if you have a virtual CISO that's doing a gap analysis, is usually the first thing we do when we go in and to a client, try to figure out what the as is. And they might see it's like, well, you've got a monitoring solution, but it's substandard. And by the way, we have a SIM that can solve that for you. Were they really identifying an actual risk there, or were they identifying an opportunity? And that's normalized this conflict of interest. And now from the SMB's perspective, you got everything labeled as a vCISO. You got folks that are putting vCISO on their LinkedIn profile to get into the field. You might recall a LinkedIn post that went somewhat viral about 3 or 4 years ago on that. That was just the worst advice. Hey, you want to break into information security? Put vCISO on your profile. Then do a couple of clients pro bono and learn from them. Yeah, don't do that. It's bad. Pricing's all over the map. For folks, be brutally honest, for folks like me, for our firm, it makes it a lot more difficult because we're going to price higher because our experience and our skill set is true information security risk management executive experience. And you get someone who's 3 years into the field and decide to call themselves a vCISO, they're going to be able to charge substantially less. Now, unfortunately, with that, you get what you pay for. My firm, we have come behind those types of vCISOs that have really done more damage than good. Bad advice is worse than no advice, and that's become a problem. And again, the service quality, the pricing, they don't understand what's going on. So they always default to the lowest bidder, but I think that's changing now. I think that as markets usually mature and you see this sort of thing happen, you don't see, for example, a car. You understand that that there are variants based on what it is you're looking for in quality. I'm going to show my age here, for example, and I'll give two extremes that are both cars, a BMW and a Yugo. Now, between the two, it's the quality and what you're going to get, where you're going to go, totally different. So I always encourage folks that they need to vet their virtual CISO. They need to start asking better questions when they're doing that. And they'll understand by doing that the difference between strategic leadership and vendor-aligned consulting with just a fancy title. So as a result, the strong, independent, experienced virtual CISOs, those with the actual risk management executive experience, they're going to thrive. You're going to see that market shifting where there's going to be more opportunity there as the customer base realizes the difference in quality. And those with lower experience or those that are have conflicted offerings, or those that are just trying to push compliance, like we talked about with the SOC 2, they're either going to have to retool or they're just going to exit. So bottom line is that the virtual CISO market, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to disappear, but it will continue on its maturity path. Prediction number 4. This is a little bit more recent, and this has really been bugging me. And from what I've seen from feedback, it's been bugging a lot of you too. I'm going to call this security shaming will cross a line. What do I mean by that? There's a troubling trend among some security influencers or wannabe influencers. For example, taking photos of perceived security mistakes made by strangers and then posting them online and framing it as awareness. So examples of this, you've seen it, I'm sure. It's like somebody taking a picture of like a laptop on a train. You know, they're behind. It's like, oh my gosh, how could this person be doing this in public? Documents left in seats on cars that are parked. So someone takes a picture through a window and then takes that and posts it online. Or also like other public places like of doing things, screens and cafes. That's always been a big one. Now, I'm not against education. Let me be clear about that. There is opportunity to help people understand that if you're going to be working on sensitive information, do it in such a way that their screen can't be seen. Don't leave confidential information out. But that's usually not the incentive behind these posts. Usually what it is all about engagement, trying to go viral, and trying to gain clout in the social media world. You'll actually see something along the lines where someone will find this kind of guy gotcha moment, put it out there and shame whomever did it and say, this is why you shouldn't do it. And for more content, subscribe to my YouTube channel and post it there. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, I've seen these, but I can never identify who the person is. Well, you all should be. If you're not familiar with OSINT, there's usually enough like data that you can figure out pretty strongly location or figure out some other identifying marks, even to the point of actually possibly identifying the individual. Just a single photo can contain enough information to infer where someone is or where they work. And from that could cause damage to the person, even though they weren't explicitly identified. And even if that isn't the case, what if like you see your face, or rather you see what you're doing, laptop in Starbucks, and all you're doing there is that you're reading news, but someone took a picture of it and thought that you were doing something else and submitted it. I don't know about you, but personally, I don't really care for someone trying to do that. It's like there's this expectation of privacy that may not be legal term of privacy, but it is like a societal term of privacy. We expect to have our space. We expect to be left alone. We expect not to be bothered. And this is an invasion of that. Now, here's the problem. You don't get to choose how someone reacts to that public shaming. And unfortunately, what I think is going to happen is that if it hasn't happened already, it's going to happen. If it has happened already, rather, it's going to happen more on scale. You're going to hear about an incident or incidents where someone reacted in such a way where it became a serious retaliation, even to the point of physical confrontation. I don't want to see that happen, but you don't get to choose how someone reacts to being publicly shamed. That's not you. Now, keep in mind, I'm not against awareness, but we don't need to public shame folks to do it. It's very simple here. If you see something, or if you just want to make your point, today you can very easily generate an AI image of the exact same thing. Looks completely real. Do that. Don't take someone's picture. Because in the end, awareness should reduce harm, not create new kinds of it. And then finally, prediction number 5, this isn't necessarily strictly an information security risk. There are information security aspects of it. And because of that, and because, excuse me, I don't think that it's talked about enough, I wanted to bring it to light. And that is that I'm going to call it this. The 1099 shortcut will become an existential risk. What do I mean by that? Well, 1099s, if you're not aware, that's a shorthand in the United States for talking about contract workers as opposed to employees, which are W-2s, we will call them. Those are just referred to, those are forms referred to at how taxing is done. So it's become shorthand. 1099s are contractors, W-2s are employees. Today, startups and SMBs increasingly rely upon 1099 contractors instead of W-2 employees. There's nothing wrong with this. It works fine. In a lot of cases, it is the better way to do it. That's primarily how we do it, for example. You'll see that as most of the virtual CISOs are contractors, unless you're like a much bigger firm, in which case you'll have folks that are on as employees. But a lot of times it's 1099s, and you see that in a lot of industries, and it works. And done correctly, it's completely valid. It's completely legal. It's the right business call. Here's the problem: increasingly, particularly among small businesses and startups, contractors are being treated like employees. And what do I mean by that? They're being required to attend staff and leadership meetings. They're issued company equipment. They're embedded in core operational and leadership roles, and they are managed day to day. Now, one of the things that is common in a contractor contract is the contractor will perform the duties contracted for at a location and a time of their choosing. That's, I would say, ubiquitous in contractor contracts. That's hard. But when you layer on all those things, the distinction collapses. So what do you have now? You have an organization that has staff using the contractor model, taking advantage of all the tax benefits, not having to provide insurance or other benefits or anything like that, not being under labor law, but are extracting all the benefits of that employee. And if the contractor goes along with it, that's fine, I suppose. But once one contractor complains, that's serious violation of or could be serious violation of federal tax and employment laws. So here's the reality, and this is the one line that I want everybody to remember here, first of all. If your contractor looks like an employee, works like an employee, and is managed like an employee, the government will eventually agree. Now, misclassification isn't just a legal issue, it's an operational one. Let's just assume that this is enforced. What can happen? Well, immediately you lose service. So there's an information security touch point there. Denial of service, rapid restructuring, loss of critical talent. You might lose folks that are responsible for the security of your infrastructure. And then reputational damage. All these things start to happen, and particularly you see service. It's like, oh, okay, that's bad. We might lose future business as well too. Now, from a security standpoint, now here's where it gets even worse. So inconsistent security controls. How do we know how well the security controls are being applied with the contractors? Do we even have them in place? Offboarding, weak offboarding. When you have an employment situation, usually your offboarding is tied into an HR employment practice as opposed to vendor management. And there's another thing to check too. If you're an employer, or rather, if you're a business and you rely on contractors, and yet you have like an extensive termination process or even and onboarding process that goes beyond what's in the contract, then you might be abusing the system. Company data living on personal devices is because if you're not issuing equipment, then you've got this issue of how do we control information on personal devices? You can do that through contract, but how strong is that really? And as you grow, as you scale, that might work in a couple of instances, but that's going to be difficult. Now, if you go the other way and say, well, okay, I'm going to solve that by providing equipment, laptops for my consultants. Well, guess what? That's one of the lines between consultant and employee that you now just crossed. That's going to be very difficult to defend should you get called on it. So in 2026, I think this is only going to get a little bit worse. I think increased scrutiny of contractor misuse will seriously impact some startups and SMBs to the point I think that some are going to shut down operations entirely. This is going to be a business-ending event. So takeaway for that is that what I want you to remember is that contractors, they're not a shortcut. They're very valid when used properly, but they're a responsibility. You need to responsibly use the contractor model the way it was designed. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for business risk that you may not even understand. So that's it. If I were to close on this, I'd point out to you that these predictions share a common theme. Security failures here, then here they're not starting with hackers. Here it's starting with governance blind spots. So checklists, convenience, misaligned incentives, assumptions that no one will notice. So I think these are going to be tested. If you're a CISO or a vCISO or a business leader, the question isn't whether or not this risk exists. It's whether or not you're seeing it clearly. And that's really the point of doing predictions, right? Shedding light on something that you see as a practitioner in the field or an SME in the field, you start to notice trends and you want to, at the very least, bring awareness to those trends. It's not about clout. It's not about going viral. It's not about building your subscriber base. It's about trying to help. That's what I'm trying to do here. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And as always, stay secure.